morning, YouTube. Star Spangled Clothing here. It's early in the morning. I haven't had time to fix my hair, so I'm not sure what we're going to be looking at. In the future, I'm probably going to buzz it all off, and I'm going to call it YouTube hair. Sort of like mom hair, but it'll be YouTube hair, because I just don't want to plaster myself all over the internet all the time with really horrible hair, which is probably what I have, because my wife's still asleep, my baby's still asleep. I'm not going to make a whole lot of noise in there, especially not the baby. But I went ahead and drew out this project, and I'm going to post a picture that a person can kind of look at a close-up, but I'm going to explain it really fast. So for the purposes of explaining a dado, I thought what better way to do that than to do a simple project. So we're going to do a picture frame. More than anything, it's going to be a dado example. It is not a picture frame. Had I been wanting to use it as a picture frame, I would have probably done a little bit more research into picture sizes. For example, I'm going to make this thing to fit a 7x10 photo. I have no idea if 7x10 is actually a photo. I think it is, but I don't know. And I've never made one. So this is really more about dados than it is about picture frames. So the purpose of the dado is, of course, to shape and to joint. Those are going to be the two things that it is doing. And there are two different types of dado. There's a stacked dado, which is the ones that look like saw blades, and they make primarily square joints. They make rabbet joints, they make tongue and groove joints, those sort of joints. And then there's a knife dado. They're used primarily to shape or to make complicated joints. And down here I drew a little picture of a glue joint, which has several 45-degree cuts on it, something you could never make on a stacked dado. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the components to a dado set. So I just drew a quick picture of a stacked dado. Now, one thing to know about a stacked dado is that most saw blades will have a series of teeth on them, right? And one of them will slope in ways like that, and then the very next tooth will slope out ways like that, right? So as it's cutting, it cuts that side of the cut, and then it cuts the other side. You know, it's alternating its cuts on the piece of wood instead of just having a flat chunk that just kind of takes the chunk out. That'd be a very unclean cut. This makes a nice, clean, straight cut when you alternate the teeth. Now on a stacked dado, you wouldn't want to use it as a regular saw blade. It actually has only, it has two separate blades that fit on your saw. One's a left blade and one's a right blade, or whatever. They're both outside blades. And they fit on your saw, this particular one. I mean, they're labeled, but you could just as easily look at the teeth. One of them's going to slope in, and one of them's going to slope out. So we have two separate blades that are cutting two different sides of the cut. So every stacked dado comes with those. And then the chipper blades, which are exactly that. They just go right in between there, and they even have just a little bit of a swath on there, but they'll go in between the two blades and just kind of take out the middle in a very crude and disgusting method. When I do a series later about kind of doing joints without a stacked dado, I'll actually take the middle out with a chisel, you know, which is really doing the same thing. Stacked dados also come with a series of spacers. When you are setting up for a cut, always have a scrap piece of wood. Always have 10 or 12 or 14 pieces of scrap wood. I always do. I have 5 million of them. And you want to run a piece to make sure that it's cutting the right width and cutting where you want it to in the joint. So that's the most important thing. I wanted to add, too, the easiest way to make sure that you got this thing in the center. I mean, you measure both sides, and you should. But you can run it one direction and then just flip it over where you're cutting on this other side. And if it doesn't take out any wood on that second cut, you are exactly in the middle. I mean, that is perhaps a more accurate test of whether you're in the middle than you're measuring, depending on how good you are at measuring. So there's a quick tip for you. And then, of course, you always want to test your joints after you're done cutting them. Let's say I cut this tongue here. I want to make sure it'll actually fit into that groove there, because It might not. Like, you might have measured just a little bit off, or it might be too tight. You do want a tight fit, but not overly tight. So there's that. Then I thought I would also very quickly, I'm filming my face like that, very quickly cover the knife style of Dado. So you just have this cam, I guess is what I would call it, and it just holds the individual knife blades here, here, and over here. And you just slide those bad boys in there, into that slot, and tighten it down. Of course, any set that you buy will actually have instructions on it, but I thought I'd just throw it out there. I mean, if you don't own a set, then hopefully this video will help you decide what set will work right for you. For many years, all I had was this set and plain saw blades, and you can do a lot of work with that. You don't even need this set. You know, I mean, the only thing I ever used it for was taking out like a lot of wood, like when I had to kind of custom fit something into a house that otherwise would have taken hours, days to fix whatever mess up it was that they did. So, because that's a lot of what I do is refurbish work. So you can actually get by without a Dado. You don't have to have one. And later on, like I say, I'll do a video where I don't use the Dado. I'll do a project without it to show that you don't need it. But they are convenient, and if you're going to buy one, I would suggest you buy a stack Dado. I mean, if you're going to be doing any joining, any building whatsoever, the stack Dado is what you actually need. Which of course you have your blades, which will either be your saw blades or your knife set. And then you'll have a Dado Insert, you know, which is just going to be the thing that you drop in your saw that the blade sticks through. And they look all sorts of different ways, but they'll have a really wide slot, so that way they can accommodate either a large knife or a large stack of blades. And then the other thing that you'll have is a Sacrificial Fence, which is really just a piece of wood that you make and bolt onto your rip fence. And what that does, and you'll see it later in the project, is allow you to run the Dado right up next to your rip fence without destroying your perfectly machined edge on your rip fence, right? So your rip fence stays whole. Essentially, you're just tearing up a piece of scrap wood that you've made. So that way you can make some of these more complicated cuts or close cuts. Okay, so we're going to be making it out of a 2x something stock. Essentially what I did was I drew the plans up as if I would be making them, albeit there's a little bit more information here than I would put in my own shop journal. But it's going to be made out of 2x something stock is what I decided. I want the opening to be 7x10. So I want there to be some wiggle room with the picture where you can kind of slide it around. I want it to be a perfect fit with the opening, which is probably not a good idea for a picture frame, which is probably why you don't see them made like that. For the purposes of this example, that's what we're doing. So then I just did some little math here to figure out what kinds of pieces I needed. For the 7-inch sides, well, let's take a look at this thing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a top piece and a bottom piece that go all the way through. And then the side pieces, which are going to be vertical, are going to have decorative cuts in the front and have the joints that meet up with the ones at the bottom. So, I mean, if the opening is 7x10, keep that in mind, and the width is going to be 2 inches, then for the width, I have the 7 plus the 2 plus the 2. So 7 plus this 2-inch piece plus that 2-inch piece is going to make a 2x11. And I'm going to need 2 of those. I always circle the quantities. It's a remnant of a job I had at one time. And for the side pieces, since we want a 10-inch opening, they're going to have to be at least that long. Plus, I'm going to use 1/4-inch tongue and groove joints in this project. So I added a 1/4-inch going both ways, this way and that way. So that leaves you with a 10.5-inch piece. And by the time I cut off that end right there to jam it down in that other piece, we'll end up with a 10-inch opening. So we'll have a 7-inch opening by a 10-inch opening. And the more you do, I mean, that's more about joint planning or anything, but I thought I would throw as much of that in as possible. These 2 pieces here, I'm going to go ahead and rip out an entire back and then glue the sides in to go up. So I'll have a tongue and groove joint there. This is going to be a simple tongue thing with a ripped back. So the glass and picture can sit back in there. It'll be easier to see on wood than it will be in the project. Other than that, I'm going to need some glass. I don't know if I have any, but to make it more interesting, I'm going to see if I do. And it would be 7 1/16 by 10 7/16, which that'll give the glass just a little bit of room to wiggle. You don't want to exact cut glass because you sure as heck can't shave that off. And then of course you need some hardware. Now this project, again, is not a picture frame. Unless it turns out just amazingly, I'm not going to use it as a picture frame. So I don't know what hardware I need exactly. I'm pretty sure that I could get this to work though. You have an 1/8" glass or picture. A lot of people throw in like a 1/4" piece of cardboard and then put in a 1/4" piece of backer, and what do you have? You probably have that filled space there, maybe minus 1/8 inch or 1/16 or something. So that wouldn't be hard to do. I mean, you could definitely turn it into a picture frame if you wanted. So that's going to be the project.